It's so good to be with you guys again, doing another week of Bible stories.
Bible stories.
This is cute. So this week we are going to be talking about Joseph and his story in the Bible.
I feel like he had a coat of something.
He had a coat of many colors.
Many colors?
Yeah, coat of many colors.
Like my xylophone of many colors,
That.
which when we say a certain word, starting with
story.
She said it. Woohoo! My xylophone of many colors. For our coat of many colors.
Hey, thought that one through. That was good.
Yeah, sure.
So we're going to be reading about Joseph from the Bible, but before we do, we need to grab our comfy blankets.
Blankets. It's kind of summertime now. My blanket's a little warm.
It's true. It's getting kind of hot, isn't it?
But it's still cozy, right?
It's still cozy.
Is it still cozy? Yeah.
And like what we've been doing the last couple weeks, I'm going to read you guys the questions first, so you guys can be thinking about that and listening as we read our story. So the first question is, why wasn't Joseph mad at his brothers for selling him to be a slave in Egypt? So that's the first question. And the second question is, what can God do with the bad things that happen to us? All right, so why wasn't Joseph mad at his brothers for selling him to be a slave in Egypt? And what can God do with the bad things that happen to us? All righty, well, I'll show you the first picture here, and we'll begin. There we go. Because Abraham trusted God, he became God's friend. Because Abraham's son Isaac trusted God, he became God's friend too. Then Isaac had a son named Jacob, who, you guessed it, learned from his father to trust God. And then Jacob had a son, and then Jacob had another son, and another, and another. Jacob had 12 sons in all. Their names were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Of all Jacob's sons, Joseph was his favorite. And I'm going to let Graham read the second page here. You can show them the picture.
Okay. So yep, of all of Jacob's sons, Joseph was the favorite. Jacob wanted Joseph to know that he was his dad's favorite, so he gave Joseph a special coat made with all the colors of the rainbow. This annoyed his older brothers. Why didn't they get special coats? To make matters worse, Joseph told his older brothers about dreams that he was having. In his dreams, Joseph saw himself ruling over his brothers. He saw his brothers bowing down to him. Hearing about Joseph's dreams made his older brothers really annoyed and really jealous. So much so that they decided they'd be happier if Joseph wasn't around anymore.
Oh man. What happens to Joseph here? There's the picture. So one day when their dad wasn't with them, they picked Joseph up and threw him in a hole in the ground. They were just going to leave him there forever until they got another idea. Have you ever gotten so mad at your brother or sister that you wanted to sell them to the circus? Well, Joseph's brothers actually did, except not to the circus. They sold Joseph to some folks traveling to Egypt, who sold Joseph again when they got to Egypt. Now Joseph had been thrown in a hole and sold twice. What a lousy week. In Egypt, Joseph worked for a very wealthy man. Joseph was honest and hardworking, and the wealthy man liked him. But the man's wife told a lie about him, and Joseph went to prison. Now Joseph had been thrown in a hole, sold twice, and sent to prison. Why would God let all that happen to Jacob's favorite son? Wasn't Jacob a friend of God? Joseph could have gotten mad and decided he didn't want to be God's friend anymore. But he didn't. He still prayed to God, and he still tried hard to do the right thing. And God had a plan for Joseph.
Okay, so we are on the green page now. There's our picture. All right. While in prison, Joseph told two of the men there the meaning of their crazy dreams. God showed Joseph what the dream meant. A few years later, Pharaoh, the king of all Egypt, also had a crazy dream. He'd heard about a guy named Joseph who could interpret dreams. Pharaoh called Joseph out of prison and told him the dream. Once again, God gave Joseph the meaning. The dream, Joseph said, was a warning. For 7 years, Egypt would grow lots and lots of food, more than they could eat. But then for 7 years after that, they would experience a famine when no food would grow at all. If the Egyptians didn't store up all the extra food during the first 7 years, they wouldn't have enough to eat during the famine, and many people would die. Pharaoh was so happy that he made Joseph the second most powerful person in Egypt and put him in charge of all the food. Joseph made sure that they would have enough to eat while things got tough.
All right. Here's the last picture. When food stopped growing in Egypt, it also stopped growing where Joseph's family lived. They were really hungry, so hungry that they traveled all the way to Egypt to see if they could find food there. And sure enough, not only did they find plenty of food in Egypt, but they also found their brother Joseph. They thought Joseph would be mad at them, but he wasn't. Why wasn't Joseph mad? Because he could see God's plan. If Joseph had been thrown in a hole, sold twice, and then sent to prison, Egypt would have run out of food and many, many people would have died. Joseph's family would have run out of food and they would have died. God used something very bad, the way his brothers treated him, to do something very good, to save Joseph's whole family. Joseph learned that God can use anything, no matter how bad, to do something good.
All right, so that's our story, and today we have what we call, or what this book calls, an everyday truth. And it says this: when I trust God, he uses hard parts of my story for my good and for his glory. All right, so now we are at the time where we get to pray. So would you pray with me? It says this: Dear God, we believe you can use our hard days to do something good. Help us to stay positive as we trust you. Amen.
Amen. And our Bible verse for this week, our memory Bible verse, is from Genesis chapter 50. And it's something that Joseph said, and it's verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And that's when Joseph was talking to his brothers. So Genesis 50 verse 20, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good.
Yeah, that's a good verse. All right, well, that's our story for today. So thanks for grabbing your blanket, and maybe you grabbed an instrument too, and every time we hear the word story, you hear the instrument like this. Yeah, anyways, thanks again for joining us today. While things are kind of transitioning for us as a church, I think this might actually be one of our last videos, if not our last video. So that makes us sad, but we're also excited that things are changing and we might be able to see each other in person anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for watching these videos with us and ultimately for following Jesus. That's why we've done this, and that's why we really do all that we do, is we just want to follow Jesus together. So whether you're super little, like you're 1 month old baby, or you're super old and however old you might want to say you are, we are so glad that we've been following Jesus together. And I think that's it. I think we're going to sign off. So yeah. Thank you again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. All right. Bye.